Hey guys, it's Reaper, and we're coming back from a fairly long hiatus on build order guides, but today we're going to be working on a 14 hatch proxy hatch. So the basic of the build, or the basic idea of the build, is comparatively to a 16 hatch, it's a lot easier to scout, and it hits a lot faster. Not as many drones obviously, because we're cutting to get the 14. And it's much stronger against if they decide to chrono out gateway units and try and contest the hatchery, which is much better for us than if we go 16. So a lot less sneaky, but a lot more powerful, I think. So the first thing you want to think about in these kind of builds is where do you want to take your hatchery? Generally, any of the forward bases will be fine, but you do want to think about if they cannon, right? So forward response is pretty common. If they'll say they get a read on what you're doing pretty quick, um, they can put cannons, say they put, you take this base, right? If they put cannons here, just to try and cancel the hatch, it's not ideal, but you can at least have the roaches run around this way. So your roaches can still get across. They're not just blocked from actually spawning, unless they target the larva, but that's a whole nother situation that we'll get into at some point. More so, I think ideally, another thing is the further away the cannons are from their actual base, so it doesn't affect your rally, is also very important. Because I know it's very difficult to have your rally. Say if they have you take this base and they put cannons here, it's going to block your units, right? So you're going to have to like set them to rally this way, and it makes it much more difficult to actually micro the battle and have to deal with that at the same time. Because if you ever mess up your rally, you're just bleeding units and losing the game, right? So ideally, um, these two bases are fine. Just be thinking about that kind of stuff, depending on if the map will changes whenever you're watching this and that kind of stuff. So just a small thing to start. Another thing you can do, like I do this game, is I actually send a drone down to fake taking a hatchery. You don't always have to do this. I actually think it's better not to usually. But this game I was playing against Showtime, so I think against people of this caliber, I always try and make it as sneaky as possible, because this way he has to go straight into my main, and it makes it a lot more confusing for him because this isn't a not many people play this hatchery timing if they're proxying, so the gas timings are a little different than what they would expect because they still got to check the thirds and all that. So it's just something to help make it a little sneakier, even though this is a more straightforward version of proxy hatch. And then we're gonna go after we put hatch down at 14. At 100 minerals, we take a gas, and then at 200, the next 200 we get, we'll throw down a spawning pool. And this is about what the supply should look like. You can watch as I do it. And then at this point, we're going to drone back up to 14 out of 14 and saturate the gas immediately. And at this point, you don't really have to do much. Just make sure to not make an overlord. I think that's the most common mistake people make. They'll make an overlord right now, which is not what you want to do. You actually want to have that money not tied up in the OV so you can get your roach horn a bit faster, as you'll see. But really, now the main thing you want to do is just see what kind of response they're going for. So he knows I don't have a base yet, but he still takes the Nexus, which is fine for him. You can hold with the Nexus. So I'll go over the different things you do with different things you see throughout the replays we go over. But in this game, this is what he went for. But as soon as your spawning pool finishes, still no Overlord, you go Roach Horn, then you start Speed, then you make 2 lings from here as soon as this finishes, then 6 from here, then Overlord. So your Overlord is actually quite delayed. Um, you don't really need it straight away. And the nice thing is, since you have these lings out so fast, since it's a 14 hatch, and the larva is available so much more quickly, if they don't have a zealot, you can start bullying this pylon. And then if they do make a zealot and it's not out in time, you can go into the main, pull the zealot out of the wall. I've been in one mini a game, distracting them in the main. The zealot goes to chase the lings, and then they don't expect the 6 lings from the main base to show up, and just depowers this, and the game ends. There are quite a few games that will happen like that if you play this, I'm sure. Obviously, it's not going to happen if people know what you're doing the more you play them, but you'll get a couple free ones that way, so it is something to keep in mind. In this game, he actually goes for Stalker, which is ideal for him. I think if he makes an Adept, there's no way he holds. And he is getting a battery. And this battery is actually very smart, because normally if they put the battery up close like this, then you're going to have the issue of you can't actually bile the battery, so super battery becomes that much more viable and a problem. A lot of mistakes Protosses make that you need to look for is if they put the battery too far forward, you can just use your biles on it and then attack move it if it gets to the stage where you need the ravagers. So one other thing with this, since I saw he went for this greedier Nexus and he chased these into the main, right? We're not going to build an OV. Sometimes you do. If you see they go something like 2-gate double chrono on stalkers and you know they're going heavy stalkers to try and defend, if that was the case, it's going to be a bit slower of a push. You're not going to be able to break them because they don't have a Nexus. They don't have all the extra stuff invested, right? So in that case, you would want to start Novi sooner because you're not going to be trading out the Lings because you're not actually going to be able to fight for a while until you get Ravagers and are able to try and bait them into a fight. But since he did this, these are chasing in the main. Delay my OV because I know I want to fight straight away because there's a big opening. I see the batteries finishing. That's what we go for. The Stalker was distracted in the main, so it's way out of position. And at this point, the game is pretty much over here. So this was just, he didn't know what he was dealing with, and it just caught him off guard. Yeah, I mean, there's nothing he can do, because we're going to have speed in a minute. There's no battery, he has no production. 2 Stalkers and Probes are never going to beat this, right? So, this game was pretty straightforward. He just didn't know what he was dealing with. And we'll get into some of the closer games and more difficult, nuanced ones here shortly. But this is probably the most basic, easy situation that you're going to deal with. You distract the unit in the main, kill the pylon, boom. Now, this is how a lot of games are going to go, but we'll get into the more complicated situations in the next replay. So let's get to the next one. Alright, so in this game, we're up against Patty Mac, and I believe this game was a little more interesting than the last one. So in this case, same thing, send the drone out straight away, that never changes for forcing hatch. In this case, I actually make my hatch right here, which is a little closer, but it works out for us. So I'm actually playing on the name Proxy Hatch this game, and I proxy hatch every game on this account, so he knows what's coming. Pretty safe to assume. He does still scout, but he has an idea of what he's dealing with, right? So he sees no base, immediately starts checking for proxies. So he sees it, and what's his response? He goes for a Forge. So Forge in this case is probably going to be one of the more common responses. It's difficult to deal with, but not always the worst thing. In this case, he's actually going to try and cannon the hatchery. So there's 2 kind of forges, right? There's either forges where they're trying to just cannon up and buy time for a Stargate or more gateway units or whatever their tech is going to be, or their defensive choice, right? It's just a buying time kind of unit, or production building. In this case, he's actually going to try and contest my hatchery with the cannons, which if they scout this fast, like he did this game, they're pretty much always going to be able to kill it. And he also gets a super fast cyber core, so he's going to have the cancel on this hatch and very high, fast tech, so it's quite difficult for us to deal with. Obviously, this comes at a cost. He's investing in this pylon and 2 cannons, so he's not going to have a nexus with this. He only has the 1 gateway, no zealoter on the way or anything like that. So seeing this, I was going to make the lings, but I cancel in response, and I do not make the 6 lings from the main. In this case, since we know this hatch is going to die, and there's no point making a queen, even if it does finish, it's not really going to accomplish much. We need the larva that this hatch would have had for us, right? So we're actually going to use the 6 lings in the main to make a queen, so we can have that larva production still, even though he's attacking the hatch. Ideally, we still make the roaches from the hatchery if he doesn't target the larva, but good Protosses will usually target it and you won't be able to get the roaches out. Squeeze them out if you can. If you can't, that's okay. And obviously, if they cannon in a way to where the roaches can't escape or they will for sure die, don't make the roaches here at all. And it's okay to just make the 3 roaches from the main and then proceed as normal. So in this game, I actually make the roaches from this base, and then I actually rally them around because we're trying not to get involved with the cannons, right? We don't really want to have to deal with them is the main thing. And he's still actually contesting this rather than trying to make a nexus. He really wants to solidify his position here. But notice how there's no tech on the way. He's quite investing a lot. We see an adept, which is also pretty nice for us. Seeing an adept, there's a couple things we can think. Initially, when I see something like this, where it's cannons and just an adept, not a stalker or something, I'm thinking, alright, that gas is going to be going somewhere else. So it's probably going to be into like something like a Stargate, or it's going to be into, in this case, it was extremely fast warp gate and a stalker after the fact. But this is still completely fine for us. So we're trying to catch the adept. Brewlings actually worked out really nice for us there. Stalker is here, and we can't really contest this too much. Kill the probe is nice, so we can delay anything, but without the lings, we can't really fight too much, because we really don't want to lose these roaches. So we're going to poke as much as we can, delay the probe from building stuff, and that's the main idea right now. But we want to make sure when you're doing this kind of stuff, and this is in almost any situation, right? You want to make sure your roaches, especially if they're alone, do not get caught in here. Because say if he, yeah, like in this case, he's pulling probes and he's going to have a stalker here and the stalker's about to pop. Say I had 8 lings with this or something like that in a more normal game and these 3 roaches. If the stalker pops on this side and my units get trapped, that's pretty much game over for you. And it's very, very difficult. So you have to be very careful and aware of that happening. So in this case, he's actually utilizing this battery very well, and he's going to try and kite back to here if we let him. So our idea is we just want to avoid this as much as possible and break in here. The nice thing is, if his stalkers are on this side near the cannons so they can kite back there, this is going to be the weak point, right? Because he has no cannons to kite back to, and this is the gateway to his main. So the kind of thought process right now is just ignore this area, let him do that and be annoying, and we're just going to try and YOLO past, because this is the best way we can deal with this in this situation. So we see this, we try and break this down, and then the lings are in. All these guys really need to do is zone. Wasn't the best micro from my end taking so much damage, but all we really have to do is zone out from this point. So we kill this, depower this, and now, since there's no probe down here, we know we're golden, because any probe that would make its way down we can just kill. And he actually recalls these stalkers, which gives me just the green light to go straight into the main. And at this point, there's really not much he can do. We're going to kill this just to make sure nothing comes up of it. Yeah, probably didn't need to kill that, but I was kind of hoping it would supply block him in that case, but it really doesn't. It was unnecessary. But at this point, there's nothing he can do. Another small thing, if you ever get a surround on units with your lings, 3 biles will kill it. So if you can trap them to where they can't get out, they will always die if you bile 3 of them. Another thing with biles is look for warpins. If you're in a winning position, and you know they're about to warp in units, you can think about saving biles to bile and kill the warpins. 2 will kill if the warpins if you bile straight away instead of 3, so you can utilize that other one for something else. But just another small thing to think about. So this is one way they'll do the forge response. It's not always like this, or even usually I would say, but this is something that people attempt to do, especially if you are a known proxy hatcher. This is one of the more popular ways of dealing with it, so something to keep in mind. And yeah, that's it for this example. Let's go into the next one. Alright, this game we gotta play against Trigger on our proxy hatch account, so same deal. This time we'll actually watch a little more from my first person, so it's a little easier to digest. Maybe if you wanna, I'll have the replays all down below, so if you wanna watch them that way, that's easy too. They'll be available there. If you have any questions, obviously, feel free to ask in my Discord or anything like that. All the links will be down below, so you can contact me if you need to for any questions or something like that. But anyways, this game, pretty normal stuff again. Just 14 hatchery, 13 gas, 12 pool. Nothing too crazy. I'm actually going to speed up the start because it's not really a huge deal. Now, since I'm playing such a high level player in Trigger, normally I would put the hatchery here. I actually try and hide a little bit because a lot of the times people will just send their probe here and not actually fully check. So you can do this on multiple maps, right? Like on Gressfan, you could put it a little further above the 3rd at the top if you get that spawn. There's a lot of different ways you can do it. Just hiding it in hatcheries is a good idea too. Not always, but it makes you a lot safer from that forward response we did in the previous replay, the further away the hatch is. And then obviously your lings will get there a little slower, and the weaker it will be if they go for a gateway response. So just something to keep in mind. But it makes testing the hatchery that much worse for the Protoss player. So same thing, we're going to drone to 14 out of 14, nothing too crazy. Saturate our gases, and as soon as the pool is done, we start our roach warren. Then our 8 lings. So the main thing in this game is we're just trying to think, what is he going for? Because we're on the name, so if you do this multiple games in a row, like I do sometimes, you're just assuming that they're going to be checking for it. And this is probably one of the better ways to play it too. Not having to hide it or be too tricky with it actually it makes it much stronger in the fact that you don't have to spend extra minerals faking sending a drone down, or you don't have to delay a building hiding or something like that. This is what we're going to do. I'm going to execute it better than you can defend it, and that's going to be that. Because these builds are very powerful if executed perfectly, just playing like that. So we see the Zealot goes contest the hatch, so that means these lings are free to run in. And when you see this kind of thing, Chrono on the gate, you see bunch of batteries going down like this, especially on the outside of the wall, they want to contest it, and it's generally going to be with stalkers. Because even though he doesn't have work gate on the way, which is usually the tell of something that's not gateway units, especially because this is delayed, you pretty much, if they have batteries like this, they wouldn't make them outside of the wall if they were going to go Stargate. So just something to keep in mind. And these lings getting in is also really important for us because now we can confirm that it's no Stargate or anything like that. And we see only one gas, which is obviously another tell. Okay, there's no tech on the way, nothing we need to be too scared of. It's just going to be a basic stalker defense, which is one of the stronger ways to deal with this. You'll see people going 2-gate, or you'll see people going 3-gate on one base. Some people go 2-gate and expand. Some people will go 2-gate robo. You'll see a bunch of different stuff, but generally the responses don't differ too much. So normally, if there's a nexus, the batteries will start at full energy, but since we don't have that issue, we can actually try and drain them very quickly. In this case, you want to utilize the roach's HP as a resource in this case, right? Uh, Stalkers take forever to kill lings. It's like 3 shots, so even though they're quite good against the roaches, and they're probably the best unit to make versus a proxy hatch, it makes the lings that much more valuable for just buying time and draining energy. So now that we've got the probe, we don't want to bleed any more lings, and we just want to pull back the roaches as they get low so we can do a hobo heal and get them back to full health, right? That's the main thing. So right now I'm thinking, okay, just got to get these back so they can safely morph because speed isn't done yet. Now he doesn't know we have a speed yet, and it's hard for the Protoss to know the exact speed timing. So if I was a little cleaner about this, I could probably time this out to where I get a fair wraparound on these stalkers where they couldn't escape, but he thinks the better of it. And he's going to play a little more passive. Now that he sees speed, he's like, oh crap, I don't want to get surrounded, I gotta go. So, at this point, he knows exactly what's going on, and he's just more batteries, more gateways, more stalkers, just playing super safe, right? Now that huge, anytime you lose a roach like that, that is a major, major feels bad. Like that is almost game ending losing a roach like that. So, not very good at all. Luckily, we do save this one, even though it was in a bit of a sketchy spot, so we need to hobo heal that. There's 2 different ways you can do your gas here. So in some cases, you can pull off gas and just do 3 ravagers and do it similar to how a normal 3 rav would be. You just kind of try and force them out of the wall with the biles. Obviously, it has its drawbacks and its strengths. It makes the initial push much stronger. You have a lot more lings with it. Uh, and you can still have enough ravagers to bile the wall, to the unit in the wall, to force them back and you let the lings in. Now, if it's elongated, it becomes a little more of an issue because you need like 5 or 6 ravagers to actually be able to one-shot cannons efficiently. So that'll be an issue if it becomes a longer kind of drawn-out attack. Granted, you don't have many drones either, so you don't want it to last too long, but there are situations where even if they have like a full mining base and a half saturated natural or something like that, even though you have no drones, it's actually still better to play passive in many a case. Think of it like almost a swarm host in a way, because you're getting so much value over time with the free buildings you're going to kill with the Ravagers. It's kind of trading out with the more money that they're going to have, right? So you're still keeping up in some way because you're basically making them spend money for free with biles, right? It's another way you can think about it. And obviously, then there's the you have to deal with batteries, making like more of an equalization because it's energy, not money, for repairing stuff, which buys them more time to make their money kick in more. And it's just a back and forth. But obviously, that's not, it doesn't matter when you have 5 Ravagers. So it's just something to think about how you want to play it. Really, I play it both ways. There's not one way is better than the other. But I would say for most people, it's probably easier just to keep on gas so you don't have to actually worry about pulling out. And if games get a little dicey because you didn't execute it the best, it gives you a little more free wiggle room. So that's another thing. For most people, I would stay in gas, but just something to think about. So in this case, we're doing our hobo heal. Another thing you can check for, if the attack gets kind of to the point like this, where it's lasting a little bit, we only see 2 gates still. He could have very likely put a pylon somewhere. He didn't in this game, but sometimes they'll hide a pylon here. Chance does in your main base sometimes. They'll put the pylon anywhere, right? And just warp in adepts once they have enough to actually feel comfortable enough to defend this base. Sometimes they'll even proxy a Stargate. Super unlikely, and if they're proxying a Stargate, you've probably already lost the game at that point. But just something to keep in mind. They will proxy a pylon sometimes, so it's a good idea to keep track of that probe. So these OVs should actually probably be doing that. You spread them out. for normal spots here, 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 just looking around for that kind of stuff. It does help quite a bit. And any kind of time you can get biles on the stalkers is huge. Generally what you want to do, say we have our ravagers on this side, we want to attack move this and then stagger biles here. So it'll be, we're attack moving the stalk, so let's say all the units are back here and there's one stalker plugging the wall. We'll attack move bile, so he'll move back from the bile, and then give it like 2 seconds, you bile again. So as soon as the next bile wears off, the other one lands shortly after, so it just buys more time for you to get free attack damage on the gateway, right? It's just a small, unless he wants to eat bile, so there's attacks if he wants to actually come out of the wall. So small thing, and this is one of those games I actually kept in gas. It did a weird in between here. Since I lost that roach early on, I kept in gas, and then I pulled out once I had enough for the third ravager since I messed up at the start. So that's an option too, if you want to try and do it like that if you mess up like I did this game. Now here, this isn't the best fight for us, but we're kind of desperate because he's getting a Nexus. Granted, we don't actually, I don't believe we have vision of that. Yeah, if this is a little farther forward, we could have. So it's kind of difficult to get proper reads because obviously stalkers can zone depending on the map. I think some maps you'll still be able to see if they have a natural or not, but like this map or Neo, they can always zone you, so it's something to think about. And at this point, he has a fair amount of units. All these shield batteries, granted all the ones up front are out of energy, but he still has all of these 5 stalkers, 3 zealots versus what? 18 links and 3 ravagers, so it's looking pretty dire, but this game just kind of goes to show you the power of the build and how if they mess up once, you can really punish them for it. So you can see there, that time I biled to zone them out so they would be away from the batteries, so they couldn't retreat back to them. So this was free stalkers, making sure this stalker can't retreat for a little bit, which is nice. And you obviously just micro your weak ravagers back as you get there. But really, with all these batteries, and we only have 3 ravagers and 4 lings versus him having 3 stalkers, a halfway done nexus, more workers than us by far, still 2 gates. Warp gate isn't too far from finishing. This it looks very, very bad for us in this case. Granted, this game was a mix of, so this is what I was talking about actually earlier. Let me slow it down here. Really, these kind of builds all come down to how you bile. That's the biggest thing I see in MMR differences when they're doing builds like this. It's all about the biles, honestly. But you can see here how I'm using the biles to zone. So 1, 1, 1, and I'm just getting free chip damage. And you want to make the bile hit the gateway too, so it's even more damage on the gate. Now, in some circumstances, the gateway being there is helping you because you're forcing them to come out of a choke into your concave every time. But he has so much battery, there's so many batteries here, that doesn't really matter as much for us. So we're just trying to get as much value as we can at this point. But I could have done it from this side, attack with the batteries, maybe bile here, hitting 3 buildings at once, that's a juicy target. But in this case, I just went for the building. Any damage is good damage, but generally you will find priorities as you play this build more. You'll see what's better as you play it. So in this case, we finally got our link count back up, and keep in mind, we have no queen this entire time. We generally don't make queens with this, unless we see very specific things, but or certain situations happen, like the other game with Patty Mac. So you can actually make quite a lot of lings with no queens. Once it's very snowbally. The main thing is just keeping your ravagers alive. But here, he doesn't kite back there, so he gets surrounded, and this is the power of these ling bile wraparounds. It's just so strong. I mean, what's he gonna do? He can't, even with super battery. He just lost 2 stalkers for free, and now he doesn't really have enough DPS to punish us, even though we don't have any surface area on this battery. It just doesn't matter. Now, obviously, I just used my biles, so these didn't have enough to kill this straight away. A little late, yeah. Tried to do it, but I didn't have energy in time because I had just biled. So, a little unfortunate, but that just goes to show you the ling bile wraparound can win you so many games. Look at this. These don't even have, they still have full energy on this one. These still have plenty of energy. But biles don't care. So, if you can make that work, it's just something else to think about. So, even though we were in a terrible, terrible spot this game, it just goes to show you just how strong Ravagers can be if you utilize them correctly. So, that's another way of handling, and we'll go to another situation in the next game. Alright, so in this game we're playing against Ranger, generally 5-3, 5-5 Protoss, not bad, but this is a very specific example I would like to show. from one of the games I did Proxy hatch. So same thing per usual, 14 hatch. I want to speed up the start a little bit because at this point you can kind of get the idea of how the opener goes. Pretty straightforward, 14, 13, 12. Nothing too complicated. You can refer back to the first two games for more specifics on that. This is more of just for the situation now that we have the basic build order gone over and different responses to what we're seeing, right? So in this particular game, what do we see with the Ovi? We see gate core, no zealot on the way, but he actually full walls. If they full wall like this with the gate, this is almost always good for you if it's two gateways and a cyber with the full wall, because that means you're at least going to kill one of these buildings for free if they go for gateway unit response. And if they do go stargate response, it's not very good if they don't full wall and have a forge, because with gateways, you don't really have a way to buy time without spending gas on the units that you want, right? So which will delay a Stargate, and then the whole point of full walling to buy time is negated. They kind of need to go Forge if they're going to go for Stargate, right? So something to think about. If you see Forge, I don't believe I have a replay on hand of that I've played recently. So let's say they did, this gateway was a Forge, right? And they were going to full wall with a Forge. In that particular case, especially if they don't start in here, I would keep the two links here just to put pressure on this, but I would actually not get speed. I would cancel speed, not make these extra links from the main, and make a queen here. This way, you have the extra gas from not having the speed for Ravagers, and you're going to make this more of a slow bust, like a slow push into their main base, right? Because Forge is for them to buy time, and you're just going to kind of accept the fact that this is going to be a slow push. You're going to play responsively to their game. And this is kind of a more complicated thing, where you're going to get a feel for it, but overall it's pretty straightforward. You always have queen production going, and you're going to just slowly try and chip away, push them further and further back until they're all the way up into their main base with just Queen Ravager. And you can make the choice. Generally, I would drone up your main as you're doing this. So roaches from here, any excess minerals goes into here, and any excess gas goes to Ravagers from those roaches. Generally how you want to play it. And then queens. I would always prioritize queens over the roaches, just so you have enough queens to not die to void rays. And always keep in mind, after the first void ray or whatever, to where they can actually defend their base, they might make a random oracle send across, or they might actually send a void ray hit squad across. So something to keep in mind. If they do that, you have to be ready and aware so you can punish them doing that by either trying to move in or just having enough units at home, making extra queens if you scout. So just because you're going to be creeping, right, with these queens, so you kind of want to creep like this too, just so you can have vision around their base of if their void rays or stargate units leave to go to the other side. But yeah, generally that's how you would do against that. Now this game is a little bit different from that, where we actually go, just since he went for this, we're just full on, still get speed, try and bust the wall, because this is, if you're going to go Stargate like this, and we can pretty much tell, right? Because it's only one gateway actually making units and no warp gate. So the money's got to be going somewhere. Like, these batteries cost a little bit of money, but he should have more stuff than this in general. And obviously it takes 3 shots to kill Lings, so you can afford to get him hit twice and then pull back, just save some HP. I could probably still poke here, but at this point I wasn't too flustered about it. And generally, since I pretty much knew already he was going Stargate, even though I didn't see it till just now, which is why I'm going straight onto this. Don't need to play passive if they don't have cannons and a forge if they're trying to Stargate like this. It's actually the opposite. You want to be as aggro as possible and just YOLO into their base. And don't make Ravagers if they don't go Forge, because if the Void Ray tries to Prismatic on them, you can always just turn them into Ravagers as they're being attacked, and it will make the Void Ray waste a lot more time on them than it would otherwise. But in this case, since this response isn't very viable that he tried going 2 gateways with the Stargate, he just dies. But this is kind of what you do in that case. I just wanted to explain kind of what you would do in those particular circumstances. So I'll probably do one more replay. I'll try and find a good one that would make sense to show, and I think that should do it here soon. So let's get into the last one and see how it goes.
luck, have fun, and
Alright, so this will be the last replay for now. If you want any more, there'll be more on my Discord of where I post replays with this kind of stuff. But this is once again on the Proxy hatch, and this game was against Virtuoso, which at the time was a 5-4 Protoss player. So, same thing at the start, we'll just get to the main part. This time, I decided to put it a little more hidden to the side, since I'm playing on my Proxy hatch name. Obviously, you can do it either way, not a huge deal. Just something that I like to mix up when I'm playing on my Proxy hatch account. So, in this particular case, everything was the same, and he does go for the gateway response this game. One thing to keep in mind, actually, on maps like this where they have to make a 3-building wall, builds like this are much more powerful because it limits the Protoss's options, right? If it was only a 2-building with a Zealot in the middle, they don't have to have that extra building straight away, which makes going Stargate that much more viable if they wanted to. So something to think about. Generally, they'll make a 3rd building anyways because it's probably the best way to defend, but it does make it give them more options if it's only a 2-gate wall. So something to think about. Not that impactful in the long run though. So in this case, what do we see? Alright, we see the core Spain straight away and a chrono, so 100% this is going to be a gateway unit response. There's no possibility of a Stargate. We are almost certain. If it is a Stargate, it's going to be so late, we just don't care. It's not that scary, he's just going to lose the game. And especially now that we see Stalkers, we're like, alright, he knows what's up, he knows he's getting proxied, and we're going to do what we got to do. So in this case, the Zealot was in the wall on time, we couldn't sneak our Lings in there, and he has just a very good response against what we're doing. Chrono on the Stalkers, very fast warp gate, and getting batteries. So, very strong response from him. Now, he did make an Adept. If they don't go double Stalkers straight away and you see an Adept, now this could be for multiple reasons. Could be they are trying to do something else with this. Could be they just didn't have the gas since he got the warp gate so fast. Multiple reasons this could be, but it means your roaches have a lot more freedom to trade. 2 Stalkers actually can push your roaches back fairly quickly where you can't do much. But an Adept Stalker is not scary at all for your roaches, so you can actually drain a lot more of the shield battery energy than you normally would be able to. Being aware of that, I immediately start poking. Generally, I shouldn't have attacked the gateway here at first. If I see this, I should always be going for units, especially when I know there's no Nexus, because even if the Nexus is started, these go down, these will start at full energy, even if it's only in production. So that's another thing to keep in mind. So in this case, I see the probe, free pick, I'm going to get that, and we just want to go for draining the units. So anytime I attack the gateway is actually wasted DPS, so this was actually a big mistake. It's 250 damage wasted on this gateway, which I did not need to. So at this point, we're going to utilize his choke point against him. Just try and get free shots. Speed's finished. But now that he has enough stalkers, we need to actually chill out for a second because we don't want to lose our roaches. So we're going to turn this into more of a slow push until we get a better idea of what's going on. So we know he's going for gateway response when we see a nexus. So we're assuming it's only 2 gates. Otherwise, he wouldn't have as much stuff as he does. Ideally, you want to hide the Lings, because a lot of times, if you're biling like this, the Protoss will feel pressured to come poke, and you always want to have your Lings on the opposite side. That way, if they come out too far, you can immediately punish by getting them caught out of their wall. And if they're ever caught out of their wall, they either have to recall immediately, or they have to trade out. Either way, is you're going to get a Lings around with biles, and at least 3 units, if you bile correctly, are going to die for free. So, always a thing to think about when you're doing this kind of stuff. This, I didn't stagger my biles, so a little sloppy on my end. Should always stagger the biles if I'm going to do stuff like this. Not the perfect game, but you don't really need to have the perfect game in these kind of situations. Start our extra ravager, and this game I do keep on gas. If I ever do want to make extra ravagers, that's a possibility. And now, I kind of see the Nexus isn't done, and the batteries have energy, right? So I know there's a big weak point right now. And he only has stalkers, nothing, and I have so many Lings. The only thing good against the Lings is this Zealot, really. The stalkers are only good for poking down at these, but on a map like this, especially because at the top, he's going to have, he has to go so far out to actually punish my Ravagers for biling this stuff. I know my Lings are going to be able to find damage very shortly, so at this point, I'm just thinking of when can I attack before this Nexus is done. I see the more batteries going down. So immediately, I just start trying to bust. This kind of stuff, they'll send depths across plenty. Not a huge deal, your rally can clean this up. Sometimes they'll even try and sneak 2. My OVs were super lazy this game. because I felt fairly confident I can just kill him with the push. But again, always check for the pylon and stuff like that with your roaches. Don't be lazy like I was. It's always important. But in this case, no super battery, stuff's out of energy, and you can just see just how bad stalkers are versus masslings. Again, a little late on the biles there. So, not playing my best in this replay, but it's still, the build's so powerful. And even though he had a relatively good response, I think the Nexus, if you're going to play Nexus, you shouldn't do it like this. But that aside, I think even though he had a decent response initially, you can always just punish for any kind of small mistakes they made like this game. So another relatively straightforward one, but just so you have an idea. Now, I will say this is only really against Protoss. If you're going to proxy hatch Terran, it's quite different, so I wouldn't try this kind of proxy hatch versus Terran players. This is only for ZVP specifically. And there are different variations towards not just Ravagers. There are spine crawler variations and things of the sort, but that's not what we went over today. This is just the most basic, bare bones version of this build. Uh, and honestly, I think it's going to be pretty strong and win a lot of ladder games, especially versus people not quite used to this kind of stuff. So if you have any questions or if you have any replays you want to show me of what you could have done better, anything like that, feel free to join my Discord and I can answer questions there. Or you can just post your replays and I'll take a look at them whenever I have the free time. So hopefully you enjoyed. And yeah, let me know what y'all think. Any ideas or things that I could do better, and just let me know. So thanks for watching, and this has been the 14 hatch proxy hatch guide. So hope you guys have good luck on ladder. GG's.